Hi everyone, and welcome to IDG Live. Today we are looking at the Stormlands. Last week we did a deep dive into House Baratheon, and I thought let's just sort of zoom out a little bit. There's quite a lot of really interesting houses in the Stormlands, a lot of history there. So rather than just focusing in on the Baratheons, I thought, why don't we just have a look a little bit more broadly. As always, I've got questions from my patrons, and as always, I'll try and pick up as much as I can in the chat as we are going through. But I thought what I'd do, just to kick us off, if we get this lovely map up. This is quartermaster.info. I highly recommend that you support them. My favourite little map here of the world of Ice and Fire, basically. What we're talking about when we're talking about the Stormlands is this area here in the middle. It's quite varied geographically. If you see, there's two forests there. The one towards the south, that's the Rainwood. The one towards the north, that's the Kingswood. In the middle of it, you get this mountain range. It stretches all the way over to the west, as far as just north of the Prince's Pass, which is the main way into Dawn. It stretches north up to sort of part way through the Kingswood, goes all the way to the coast on the east, includes a few of the islands that you can see there, most notably Tarth, which is that largest island that we've got there. And as I say, it's quite a varied landscape that we've got going on. Now, probably the first point to make about the Stormlands as a whole historically is that this was one of the first places that got colonized, invaded by the first men as they came across. We talk about them coming across the land bridge from Dawn, but that takes them into Dawn, but just north of Dawn, you just go through a mountain pass and you end up in what is now known as the Stormlands. So some of the first part of the land to be colonized by humans was indeed what we now think of as the Stormlands. And that ancient history, we have records of the children of the forest being there in these deep forests. That forest, incidentally, you can see it on the map. I talk about two forests. They used to be joined up, and they used to go all the way over to the west coast, near to the Iron Islands. So that used to be a massive forest that sort of cuts right across the Riverlands. And down here, the children of the forest were there in numbers. Also, in the foothills of those mountains, the Red Mountains, we've got the Dornish Mountains. That's where the giants were. And so a huge amount of fighting initially went on between humans and these races that were already living there in Westeros. And when you're going around the Stormlands, and we have a couple of chapters where we have this as an example. The best example probably actually is in one of the pre-release chapters from the Winds of Winter, the Arianne chapter, Arianne 2. She is passing through this area of the Rainwood, heading towards to Storm's End. And she finds there's this underground cave system, which has got writing, scribblings on the wall, legends that this is where the children of the forest were. This is an area that is rich in history of the children of the forest, to the extent that even, and we'll get onto it in a moment, but even when we get to the Andal invasion, which was probably thousands of years later, legend has it that the king, the Storm King at the time, got the children of the forest into an alliance to defend the land against this new invader, against the Andals. That doesn't. Yes, it's a legend, but it's not one of the ancient legends. So we actually probably should take it a bit seriously, which does make you wonder: might there still be children of the forest here, hidden in these deep forests? Those were the bits, if you remember the pact, when the pact was made between the first men and the children of the forest, those were the bits of Westeros which were left to the children of the forest, the deep forests. And these are probably certainly south of the Neck, the two biggest and deepest forests that we have. So there's a whole load of history going on there, that when we're focusing in on south of the Neck, which bits of the world may the Children of the Forest still be? We always think about the Riverlands, Isle of Faces, but do not forget about here in the Stormlands as well. So anyway, humanity fought against the Children of the Forest and the giants. The giants were wiped out. There was the treaty, the pact with the Children of the Forest, and humanity founded itself here properly, building up not cities in this area so much, but a whole load of really strong castles, the strongest of which is this one here above me, Storm's End, which is a legendary castle. Perhaps we'll talk a bit more about that later as well. Certainly, we'll talk about the myth. I've got a question about that, the sort of the founding myth of the castle. But it is on the coast, right on Shipbreaker Bay, and it withstands the battering of the waves and the wind, and has done for thousands of years, and also has never, up to the point of the story that we've got to, has never been taken in an armed assault. So it's quite a legendary castle. If you were to actually talk about what are the most legendary castles in the world of Ice and Fire, you'd have Harrenhal, but as in terms of an ancient castle, probably Storm's End is up there along with Winterfell. So this is a part of the Seven Kingdoms which has got great, deep, redolent history. And over time, as I say, the Storm King, the Durrandons, the Durrandan family, they ruled from Storm's End. Now, over time, their kingdom expanded and contracted. There was a brief period of time where we're told that their lands extended no further than you could. I think it's no further than you could spit from the walls of Storm's End. So really quite small. At other times, they extended out beyond even what we think of now as the Stormlands into the Riverlands. So this was ebbing and flowing over time. But the houses, the noble houses that are there in that part of the world, have always been swearing fealty to House Durrandon and the Lords of Storm's End. They've had two enemies that have been keeping going for a long, long time. The first is Dawn. Dornish raids across the mountains have carried on for a long, long period of time. And what you get there, if you look at that strip of land, which is the Crown Lands, which sort of goes across the top of the mountains, that is quite low-lying land. With the sort of rolling hills, plains, that's known as the Dornish Marshes. There's more Dornish Marshes over into the Reach, but this is the Stormlands Dornish Marches. And then the Marcher Lords are some particularly well-known and martial houses who have been fighting against the Dornish for a long, long time. And these are houses like House Dondarrion, House Karen, who are known for being really strong martial houses. The other enemy they've had for quite some time is the Reach, which was the Kingdom of the Reach, led, of course, by House Gardner for a very long time. We don't get so many stories of conflicts, but we are told again and again that this was an ongoing conflict. So the battles that they had were on all sides. The south against the Dornish, to the west against the Reach, and then to the north against whoever was ruling the Riverlands at the time. That was an ever-changing feast. And then to the east, the sea itself. So the setup of the Stormlands didn't really change hugely over time. We had House Durrandon based in Storm's End, and the houses there who paid fealty to them. But the biggest challenge came from the Andal invasion. Now, as I've said many times during this series when we've been going around looking at different parts of the Seven Kingdoms, the Andal invasion was not just one massive invasion fleet that they had to have a big battle and decide who won. No, this was here's 7 ships coming across, landing in this one place. Then a year later, here's 10. A year later, there's 2. It's just this drip, drip, drip of an armed emigration, whatever, into Westeros by the Andals. And for a long time, the Stormlands did hold out. The first, really, we talked about it when we were there, the Vale of Arryn. They were the first, really, to have to face up to this, but the Stormlands also had to face up to this. And over time, although they won many, many battles, it would just keep coming. Another load came, another load came, another load came. And eventually they made the same decisions that noble houses across the land took, which was House Durrandon decided, okay, we'll just marry into the Andals rather than fighting them every few years. Let's marry into the Andals. So Lord Durrandon at the time married an Andal woman. Their son, the next Lord Durrandon, married another Andal woman, and then all of the other lords in the land married the Andals, and over time, the First Men ancestry, because these were all First Men, the First Men ancestry did start to dissipate to the point where this was now an Andal culture. Incidentally, the first part of the Stormlands to fall, as it were, to marry into the Andals was Tarth. We will talk about them as well in a little bit. So the Stormlands carried on as they were before. The Andal invasion moved on, but it moved past the Stormlands, moved westwards into the Reach, into the Westerlands. And the next big challenge they had came around the time of the Targaryen invasion. Now, at that point, we have Argilac, King Argilac Durrandon, who is Argilac the Arrogant. He became known, not a name he took on for himself, but this was how history remembers him. He was there, actually, in many ways, kind of provoking the Targaryen invasion. I'm sure it would have happened anyway, but he tried to get the Targaryens to come in to create a kind of a buffer zone between him and the River Lords at the time. Harren the Black was there, if you remember, who was building a massive castle and really staking his claim. Argilac was trying to play politics, use the Targaryens for his own gain, basically turning them against the House Hoare, and that backfired. Aegon invaded. Argilac did not bend the knee, and Rhaenys was the one who came in and killed him. Well, she did personally, but she took an army there and her dragon, and he died. In his place was put Oris Baratheon, who was rumoured to be the half-brother, we talked about this last week, rumoured to be the half-brother of Aegon the Conqueror. He decided to take a very pragmatic approach. He was made the protector of this new, it was no longer a kingdom, but this was a constituent part of the Seven Kingdoms, and he decided, I'll just take over from the Durrandons, but in a way that is as the least offensive way as possible. He married the daughter, Argilac's daughter, so his children and the Baratheons that followed could claim their descent from House Durrandon as well. He took the castle, he took the sigil, he even took the house words from House Durrandon. He basically came in and just sort of said, okay, well, I'll just marry into the family then. quite a canny move. We often don't think of the Baratheons as being like these canny political operators, but it was quite a sensible move. And from that moment on, the Baratheons were the Lords of Storm's End, and they were the Storm Lords, the House Paramount, Lords Paramount of the Stormlands. Now, through this time, the Baratheons were one of, with the possible exception of the Velaryons, but maybe not even them, the closest connected family to the Targaryens through marriage. We looked at it last time, for that there was like 3 marriages in 5 generations or something like that with the Baratheons and the Targaryens. They were really, really closely enmeshed. For a very long period of time, the 3 big families just below the Targaryens were the Velaryons, the Baratheons, and the Hightowers. They were right up there. Bigger, more powerful, more important than the Lannisters, more important than the Starks. They were one of the most important families. And of course, when Robert Baratheon had his rebellion, and proclaimed himself king, the Maesters, one of the ways that they justified it was on the grounds, or justified him being king, was on the grounds of the fact that he was actually part of the royal family. Once all of those Targaryens had gone, he was probably 3rd in line to the throne anyway. If you know, after Viserys and Dany. So this. They could argue this was actually just a Targaryen civil war in many ways, just a family battle in the same way that the Targaryens have been fighting themselves for such a long time. So after that, obviously, we get the Baratheons are now House Baratheon. They're now the ruling lords. So the Lord then becomes king. He's based in King's Landing. He made the decision that Stannis, who was for a short period of time his heir, should then be Lord of Dragonstone, which was what the Targaryens had always done. The Crown Prince was the Prince of Dragonstone. Stannis, however, took this as a bit of an insult, because Targaryens may well like Dragonstone, but not many other people do. It stinks. It's a rocky island off the coast. It might be great for dragons, but it's not hugely good for humans. It's dark, it's miserable. Renly, the younger brother, got Storm's End, the ancestral home, and so Stannis saw this as being a slap in the face. He's off on some random island. Renly can live it up the way that the Stormlords always used to. He ruled out of Storm's End, and this is, I think, when we try to understand why it was that so many of the Stormlords followed Renly rather than Stannis. Yes, Renly was a more charismatic figure. Yes, he was quicker off the mark. But the fact was that for the previous 15 years or so, he had been basically ruling as a Stormlord out of Storm's End, as had always been the case. Robert Baratheon had gone off and done his thing off in King's Landing. Stannis, nobody hugely loved him anyway, but he was off in Dragonstone, didn't come back all that much, so they didn't really even know who he was. Renly was like one of the Stormlords, a Storm King. So the familiarity that there was there, and the impression he will have given them over time, was that of something that they understood, as opposed to Stannis, who they didn't know. Okay, so that's enough about the history. Let's have a quick flick through the chat. Weirwood Net, thank you so much for gifting 5 live memberships. If you don't know what memberships are here on this channel, or anywhere on YouTube, actually, the best way to support this channel, if you wish to do so, thank you, by the way, is over on Patreon. If you don't wish to do that, and there's a link to Patreon, I'm sure somewhere you'll find it. if you don't wish to do that for whatever reason, then being a channel member here is also an easy way to support this channel. So thank you very much for that. And when you've been a channel member for a while, you get some free memberships just so you can give out to people, see whether they like it. Maura Lee saying, just a show of love, support and appreciation for all the fabulous content, merch and stories, as well as saying for all the mods and the fabulous folk in the chat. Maura, thank you so much. I hugely appreciate it. And I know it's your birthday week, so very happy birthday to you. I hope you have the best day imaginable. So thank you very much. I think I've got a couple of questions from you coming up as well over on Patreon. Reflective Rambling, picking up a question for James Harrington. Thank you very much. I love it when people do this, picking up questions for other people. It just flags them for me, makes it easier for me to see. Question, do the Baratheon features that Ned notes come from the Storm Kings? Because I thought the original Baratheon was a Targaryen bastard. Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of both, is the answer. So because we get the original Oris Baratheon married into the Darndon family, his children then had the look, the Darndon look. Now, what where his looks, Oris's looks, came from before that, he certainly didn't appear to be like the classic Valyrian look. So it wasn't 100% clear that he was the half-brother of Aegon. This was just rumoured and whispered. But yes, the idea was very much that House Durrandon's looks and the Stormlander looks did then pass down and become the Baratheon look. Okay, let's go to some questions from my patrons. If I can just get, actually, why don't I'll put me up for a little while. There we go. Let's go to some questions from my patrons. James Horner saying, first of all, thank you to you and your mods for creating this welcoming space. Yeah, if you're watching this live in the chat, please do just give a little bit of love to the moderators. They do a fantastic job. I have read online a few times the idea that the reason so many in the fandom love Stannis is because Davos loves Stannis. Do you think this could be the same with Robert and Ned? 90% of what we see of Robert is through Ned, and he does seem to have a huge blind spot where Robert is concerned. Also, why do you think that there isn't a city in the Stormlands? In fact, Westeros has hardly any cities compared to Essos. Okay, well, let's deal with the first bit. Yeah, I do think that a lot of our understanding of Robert Baratheon does come, and the way that we view him does come from Ned, because the times that we actually see him is mostly from Ned's perspective. We get a little bit from Kat's perspective, we get a few flashes from other Starks, and then it's only later that we get people like Cersei remembering him. I think, though, it's probably fair to say that the fandom has got quite a well-rounded view of Robert Baratheon. We may enjoy him as a character, but I think that the fandom generally sees his flaws as, and if anything, underemphasizes quite what a charismatic all-round hero he was in his younger days. Not to say that he's was a good person. There are many flaws to his character then as well, but he was, Ned, I think, called him a maiden's dream. Everybody accepted that he was tall, he was broad, he was a great fighter, he was a leader of men, he was driven. There was a lot to admire about him in his early days. So, yes, I think I would agree that we do see quite a lot of more sympathetic view through Ned's eyes, but I think we do get quite a well-rounded view. As for the cities, why isn't there a city in the Stormlands? I think the answer to that is because the Stormlands has been at war for so long. This is known to be that they're always at war with the South, they're always at war, or often at war with the North and the West. And although they do have ports there, the Shipbreaker Bay and that area around there is not great for ships. There are better natural harbours elsewhere. And as a result, um, there's no big port that could turn into a city. And if you think about the cities that we have in Westeros, what do we have? We have Old Town, we have King's Landing, we have Gulltown, we have Lannisport, and White Harbour. They're all ports, and that it makes absolute sense from a historical perspective. Port cities or cities on rivers, that was just the normal thing. So the fact that there isn't an easy natural harbour in the Stormlands probably explains a lot. The fact that they were often at war also, I suspect, means that they more naturally built strong castles and defensive fortifications rather than cities, which tend to be quite, by their very nature, large and sprawling, and a lot easier to sack and burn down and things like that. So that, I think, is the reason why. It's also worth saying that we are told that the Stormlands is one of the smaller parts of the Seven Kingdoms, but it's also one of the lowest populations. It's it's got some mountainous regions. It's got a lot of forest land where there's obviously no big settlements. It does have some sort of low hills and pastures and things like that, but they are in the Dornish Marches, and what you're going to build there are castles. You're not going to be building lots of wide settlements. So there's actually quite a low population, is the sort of the thing to round that off. Okay, let's go into the chat. Stephanie Lash, thank you very much, saying, love that you've kept this channel alive and thriving. What do you think would have happened to Lyanna and Jon if she had not presumably died in childbirth? Well, she died, as far as we can tell, a bit after childbirth, postpartum complications. There is a more technical word for it that normally someone in the chat will help provide. But that's the working assumption. What would have happened to her? Well, I think she would have had to, in the best possible way, disappear, because she would not have wanted to be with Robert, and her child would be in danger. She would not wish to, I'm sure, she would not wish to be parted from her child. And so the only real answer to that is to go in hiding somewhere. So where? I mean, I don't know. Ned, I fully subscribe to the idea that we have Shara Dane basically in hiding in the Neck. Maybe she could have gone there, maybe going over to Essos. But I think going into hiding somewhere is probably the answer. Robert Baratheon was the new king in complete control, and she would not want anything to do with him. And you know how he would react to the child. Martin S. saying, evening, Robert. Evening to you too. I hope you're well. I am. Thank you. There is a Storm King in Memory, Sorrow and Thorn by Tad Williams as well. In Aluki, the Sita Prince, the sequel came out 2 days ago. Yeah, I remember you mentioned this last week. So yeah, the book is now out. As I say, it's a book series that I read quite a long time ago. Did very much enjoy it. But yeah, there we go. Do go and check it out if you are interested in that. Thank you very much. What's we got going on? Let's go to a question from my patrons. And this is Philippa Eilhart's secret girlfriend. saying, "Good evening, Robert. Good evening to you too. The ancient myths and legends of A Song of Ice and Fire have always been my favourite. I'm particularly interested today in the legends about Durin Godsgrief, his wife Elenai, and his battle against the gods. If you wouldn't mind recounting that briefly." So I'll happily do that. I know your question goes on. I will talk about the rest of that now. But this is the founding myth legend behind Storm's End. We get Durin Godsgrief, though he didn't really go by that epithet at the time. He fell in love with and married Elenai, who was the daughter of the two gods. It was the storm, the wind gods of the sea and the wind, and they did not like the match. They did not want their daughter marrying this mortal. So they disrupted the wedding. They threw a storm at the wedding. He declared war on them. And he built a castle right there on the sea's edge, defying them. They destroyed it. He built another one, they destroyed it. He built another one, they destroyed it. 6 times this happened. And then on the 7th time, he built what we now know as Storm's End. This was built depending on the legends bits of the legend you wish to listen to. Maybe the Children of the Forest had a hand in this. Maybe a young boy helped out with the design, who would later be known as Bran the Builder. Whatever it was, this was built this kind of round shape where the joins between the stones it's almost imperceptible. You can run your hand along them and not feel the cracks. And the storm gods crashed against this, and they could not prevail. Durin set this up as his new castle, named it Storm's End for obvious reasons, and then ruled from there. Now, the legends say he then ruled with his wife for 1,000 years. Perhaps he did. Perhaps this is a very similar sounding story to the Grey King over on the Iron Islands, for example, this ruling for 1,000 years. Perhaps the Maesters say perhaps this is just other people who shared the same name coming after him and getting mixed up in legend. What are we to make of this story? Well, George R. R. Martin, we have this normal sort of disclaimer whenever we start talking about the legends of A Song of Ice and Fire, the age stories from the Age of Heroes, or even earlier from the Dawn Age. George R. R. Martin says, don't treat them as actual stories of what happened. Treat them as you might legends from our own past here. There's probably some truth there. There's probably some things that happened which were quite similar to that. There are probably some characters who may even have had the same names. But the actual stories, they've just been passed down generation to generation, made to sound cool. The details are lost and changed. You shouldn't take them as literal truth. So that's the disclaimer that we have to start this with. But what we do know is that clearly Storm's End, the architecture of Storm's End, is well ahead of its time. This is a really ancient castle, but it is there right on the cliff edge, and it has withstood the ages and is as strong now as it ever was. There is, we know, some magic surrounding it, some defensive magic surrounding it. This is when Davos has to get Melisandre inside Storm's End so that she can birth her shadow baby, because she could not birth the shadow baby and then send it in, because it would not be able to get past the defensive magic. This kind of feels a little bit like the Wall. in this kind of, it's not just the physical barrier, there's also a magical barrier going on there. There is a kind of a feel of Children of the Forest, and a lot of the things that Bran the Builder is said to have built in this structure above ground, but then we get this cave system underneath, which seems equally old. So there are hints here. I think for me, it seems quite likely that, yes, the Children of the Forest were somehow involved in creating Storm's End. Why, how, we don't know. George R. Martin has told us many times we'll never get confirmation about the gods' existence or not. So whether these gods actually really did exist in any way, or whether they're just sort of anthropomorphications of really bad storms, it's quite hard to say. But as a founding myth that allows for the establishment of a castle and then a dynasty, this works really well. You go on, Philippa Eilhart's secret girlfriend goes on to say, I'm reminded about how many houses in the Reach claim their power via descent from Garth Greenhand. He represents growth and fertility. Duran and Elenai here, House Durrandon, are representative of unshakable resolve and determination, arrogance against the gods even. It feels appropriate this determination can still be found in the descendants of House Durrandon. Then you sort of say, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the legends, which I've pretty much done, I think, but do you think that Duran Godsgrief and the goddess Elenai can tell us anything about the story in the current era, or about their Storm King descendants with whom we're more familiar with? So I think you've hit the nail on the head in saying that there's a story here. There's a founding myth that helps inform the culture of the Stormlands. Now, you can take the kind of prosaic approach to this, which is to say, this is the founding myth that people, this is what they like to think about themselves. Because like the noble families of the Reach, within the Stormlands, there was one, I forget his name actually, but one of the Storm Lords, Storm Kings, I should say, he had a lot of children, and this means that almost all of the main houses in the Stormlands trace their roots back to House Durrandon as well. They're connected to House Durrandon, and so there is this kind of collective feel of what it's like to be a Stormlander, and this kind of creation myth about defying the gods, about resolve, about not giving up, about standing firm, and also kind of the fire and the fury, the storm and the fury. Ours is the fury, the house words there. That is how they, as a people, how they self-identify. So that's the slightly more prosaic, and I think there's definitely an element of this. George R. Martin, I think, is wanting us to know, is that when you get that founding story, it is what it is, because it has been retold time and time again, and that informs the people of what it is to be a Stormlander. What are the virtues that we hold up as being good? You could, however, then try and claim some kind of more magical interpretation, if you wish, which is that this means, unlike when you get the Starks, or when you get the many of these other founding, the Lannisters or whoever, the Stormlords literally think they're descended from the daughter of gods. So they think that there is something of the godhead within them, and that informs their more martial side, and perhaps creates a part of their more martial side. So whether or not you buy into that sort of slightly more magical interpretation of things, I certainly 100% buy into this. This is a self-identifying story for the people of the Stormlands. Gilio saying, what social practices or beliefs make Stormlanders culturally unique? It's an interesting question because I think a lot of them, they're not unique in as much, which is not to do them down, in as much as they are Andal by culture, they're parts of the Seven Kingdoms by culture. They are probably, you would say, the most universally martial, military-minded of the Seven Kingdoms, which is probably the most unique thing about them. But their greatest expression of that, their Marcher Lords, is something that the Reach also share. They have their Marcher Lords as well. So I think if I were to sort of try and express this in a way that isn't sort of offensive to these Stormlanders, I think that they've been set up as, yes, they are, as a people, as a culture, they're all about the fury and the passion, and they're all about the military prowess, but these are just things that are slightly more emphasized than elsewhere. They're not living in a very different climate, like, say, the North or or Dawn, or even on the Iron Islands, each of which are dominated by the particular climate and geography there. They have such a diverse geography. They're not distinguished by a particularly different religion in the same way that, again, the North and the Iron Islands are. They're not distinguished by looking or sounding particularly different. They are just very Westerosy. And you will get some who live in the woods, you'll get some who live in the mountains, some on the plains, some in a castle on the cliff tops. So there is no one unifying cultural practice, I would say. Martin S. asking, how many Bannerman houses do the Baratheons have? I don't know if we're actually told exactly how many, but there's probably a sort of the first tier off the top of my head. I would say there's sort of like 8 to 10 of the kind of like the top tier houses, and then quite a few underneath that. Martin S. also asking, what is a Storm King in this context? King of the Stormlands? I'm pretty sure it's quite different from what it is in Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. Right, so a Storm King, when I say Storm King, that's the name they give themselves. So the Starks were the Kings of Winter. Then you get the Kings of the Rock, which was the Lannisters, because they're from Casterly Rock. This is what the House Durrandon called themselves, the Storm Kings. That's their cool name for themselves. So they're taking their identity from let's say, probably the most unique part of their geography, which is the storms that happen off of their coasts. Okay, let's go to Lady Vaughan-Strauss saying, hello, a question from Laird Vaughan-Strauss. Hi there, Laird Vaughan-Strauss. What is the trade in the Stormlands? What do they do? What is their biggest cash crop or commodity? Well, as I say, one of the key things is that they're not specialists in any one thing. It is a very balanced economy. It's worth saying that this is a lush and fertile land. We think of the Reach, maybe the Vale of Arryn, the valley in the Vale of Arryn, as being like the most lush and fertile parts of the Seven Kingdoms. The Riverlands is generally seen as being quite like that. The Stormlands is too. It gets a lot of rain, but it's, whenever you get the descriptions of it, it's very green, a lot of it, until you get down to sort of the more mountainous areas. It's very green. Things grow. They have, as you've seen, they have 2 of the largest woods. So there is a lot of kind of woodcraft that is there. So it's not as developed as perhaps in Cohor, where they're really well known for their woodcraft and carving and things like that. But there's a lot of wood comes from the Stormlands, and on the coast, a lot of fishing happens. But beyond that, yes, they have farmland. They have some mines. They do some sort of coppicing that's quite rich and varied. It's just that it's not a huge sort of piece of land, not like the Reach. So they can't claim to be as hugely rich as the Reach with all of their many lands, with the farmland stretching out all over the place. But they do all right. Class Ballerina, hi there, saying, had the incest not been found out, this is the twincest we're talking about here, Joffrey lived and Renly not had issues due to his sexuality, would rule of the Stormlands have gone to Tommen or Shireen? Okay, so or not had issue. Oh, so you say not had issues, not had issue, as in not had any children. Would rule of the Stormlands have gone to Tommen or Shireen? Well, I mean, it's an interesting question because fundamentally, who rules the Stormlands is down to the king. So it would be Robert Baratheon who decided, or after him, Joffrey who decided. Now, I think the working assumption is that Joffrey would have his own children in due course, and so yes, you might wish to give land to Tommen or Myrcella. Probably Tommen more than Myrcella. Might he have been there after Renly? Well, unless you're going to kick Renly out, that's a very long time. And my instinct is that even if Renly might not have actually had any children, he was clearly open to the idea of marrying someone for political advantage. He married Margaery for political advantage. And I think that he would probably be more open to the idea of adoption, or perhaps even slightly more unofficially polyamorous relationship. This certainly seems to be where they were kind of hinting that they might be going with that storyline with Renly and Margaery. So I don't think it would have been an issue. I suspect that he would have found some kind of way around it. But ultimately, the Lord of the Stormlands decision was down to the king. Lunar Cascade, did they have a prominent naval presence? They do have a fleet, but prominent, no. The three biggest fleets are the Royal Fleet, the Iron Fleet, and the Red Wine Fleet. So those are the three biggest. We don't really. Yes, there are Baratheon ships, and there are other places along the coast do have ships, but given the issues with the storms and the sea around there, and the fact that there doesn't appear to be any particularly good natural harbours there, no, they don't. They have a sea presence, but they don't have a significant navy. Let's put it that way. Lady Vaughan-Strauss saying it is impossible for her to think of Storm's End without thinking of Monty Python and the Holy Grail. We built a castle, and that sank into the swamp. So we built another castle, and that one sank into the swamp. And so we built a third castle, and that one burned down, fell over, and sank into a swamp. But the fourth one stayed, and that's what you'll inherit, son, the strongest castle in these lands. Which makes me wonder, why did they choose to build a castle in such an inhospitable place? Even if they did have Bran the Builder's help, it seems a nearly unapproachable structure from any angle, which is great for a castle, but challenging to leave and not great for a home. Also, where are their vassals farming? How do they even get outside of the walls of Storm's End for protection? Okay, so why build it there? Well, we've got the legend, the myth that we've already talked our way through. That would have us believe that Durin Godsgrief sort of stood there on the cliff edge and shook his fist at the gods and said, "I'm defying you by building a castle here." That probably is not true, but having a castle there, which is impossible to attack from half of its sides. In fact, actually, that whole side is often don't see it in the pictures we have. The whole side facing out doesn't have any windows, so you don't have windows going outwards. So it's just this really flat or curved wall where you can't even get a grip because the stones are so closely packed together. It's very hard to attack. So the only way to attack is overland. There is a way in, obviously, overland. So you can do that. Where the vassals farm? Well, for a year during Robert's Rebellion, then you had Mace Tyrell and his whole army, the biggest army in the Seven Kingdoms, camped outside Storm's End. And they were very happy there. There's clearly, outside Storm's End, there's clearly a large enough area for an army to be parked up and not worry too much about food because he was feasting all the time. Yes, I'm sure they had supply lines coming in from the Reach, but still they were getting food from the local area, I'm sure. So the vassals are just there and around. Storm's End was built there because it's a very defendable place. And I think, as far as I'm concerned, I think we don't really need huge amounts more of an explanation than that. It's, if you're going to build a castle, you build it somewhere where nobody's going to take it, and that has proven to be the case. I entirely get, again, if we're trying to see the real story behind the myth, I entirely get this idea that this was not the first try. They tried to do something and it didn't work. They tried to build something else, it didn't work. I absolutely get this idea. And incidentally, this is not the only thing that Bran the Builder is associated with construction that we get that with. We had the high tower we have today. I think they built 4 wooden structures before allegedly Bran the Builder came in and said, well, this is what you want, a nice stone building. And so this is actually just part and parcel of how these things work. The first keep up in Winterfell, we're told it's very likely it was being built and rebuilt, and what we see now is probably not the first thing that was there. So this is just a part and parcel of castle building. Right, let's go to Roman Lakovets. And thank you, by the way, Roman. I saw you did the super sticker before we went on air. Hugely appreciate that. Thank you. Saying, somewhat related to the Stormlands, when do you think that George R.R. Martin decided to make Aegon or Fagon part of the story? It's pretty clear that in A Game of Thrones, Varys and Illyrio want to put Viserys on the throne. He's not said exactly when, but my best guess is that this was so we don't actually meet him until we get to A Dance with Dragons. My best guess, and maybe one day we'll find out, is that this is one of those things which fell out from the 5-year, the abandonment of the 5-year break, which I've talked about several times. He was originally planning to have a 5-year break partway into this story so that all of his characters could kind of grow up. The Stark children and so on could just get older. The dragons could get bigger. So my instinct is that this was one of those things, and he thought, well, Danny can't come and invade just yet, because the dragons are still actually quite small. Even if we say the dragons grow quickly, she'll need another year. So I suspect that might have been part of the process, that he'd go, well, so why don't we have an invasion before that? But it doesn't feel to me like just a complete bolt on thing. It is kind of fed through from very early on, this idea that Varys has got an agenda that we don't know all the details of, and it's not it's not as straightforward as it first appears. So that is in there. When he started with and you remember Dance with Dragons and the Feast for Crows, they're happening sort of at the same time. When he started writing that's the point at which he added new big bits of storyline, things that were already there, but he's made them bigger. The Dornish plotline, the Euron plotline, these things he's added in at that point, and he also added in Fagon. So some point around there, I think he's decided, we're just going to expand this, make a bigger, more detailed, more layered story. And I think he already had the idea, but he just decided to go with it at that point. Luna Cascade saying, little off topic, are you excited for the upcoming Aegon the Conqueror movie? Yeah, so this is, I'm happy to talk about this. It's slightly off topic, but we got lots of random bits of George R. R. Martin news, so I'll just quickly rattle through them here. We've had confirmation that Warner Brothers, who own HBO, are we're told, in early stages of looking at Game of Thrones films. George R. R. Martin apparently is involved in this, so Warner Brothers and he are playing around with a few ideas. It's early stages, to the extent to which they haven't got any writer involved. They haven't agreed on exactly what it is. So we're working under this assumption, because this idea of there being an Aegon the Conqueror film has been out there for a little bit. Again, HBO kind of dropped this as a possibility a while ago, but we don't have confirmation of it yet. So I think it definitely will happen. I say definitely, very probably will happen, but we're looking at something a good few years away. I know some people who are probably paying even more attention to this than me think that the most likely thing is that you would have a film, or maybe a couple of films, on the actual Aegon's conquest, and follow that up with The Sons of the Dragon, which was a novella that George R. R. Martin did, focusing in on Aenys and Maegor, which got turned into eventually part of Fire and Blood. So I think it will happen. If so, I'm very excited. I think this is one of those things where I'm most excited about adaptations within George R. R. Martin's world where we've got the source material. And I don't think we're likely to we will get a few other snippets here and there, probably around the whole prophecy issue. But in terms of what actually happened, I think we've got the vast majority of the information now about what actually happened in the invasion. So I'm feeling confident that they've got everything they can do. and so they'll go ahead with that. So that's one of the things. We also had confirmation that they're looking at video games. It's not the first time we've heard this, but apparently Warner Brothers are wanting to focus in on 4 different franchises for video games going forward. No information about what that might. One of which is Game of Thrones. No information about what that might be. Personally, I hold out. It almost certainly won't happen, but I just hold out hope for an open world Westeros video game. I just think that would be absolutely amazing. I would spend far too long playing that game and not be able to get anything else done, I'm sure, but I think that would be fantastic. I've said the same about Lord of the Rings. If they just create an open world Lord of the Rings, I know people will say Lord of the Rings Online, but just a video game I can just play on my own at home, I'd be fantastic. So that's the second bit. The third bit of information, which was George R. R. Martin is on his blog, or not a blog. He's been going through. He took a month in Europe, mostly in the UK, and he's sort of telling us blog post by blog post when he was in different places what he did, who he saw, and in London, he's told us about Oxford, which he was at for I think only a day or two. But when he was in London, he met Maisie Williams, who played Arya, obviously, and teased that they talked about. And then he does this quite often. Oh, ... But I don't want to say anything. I don't want to jinx it. But it would be amazing, or something along those lines. This doesn't necessarily mean that this is a her being Arya again. Maybe it does. We just don't know. But keep half an eye on that. And then the thing that I was most excited about was the fact that he met the production team behind the Iron Throne, the stage play, which he seems very happy with. It sounds like, and I'm not in the theatre world myself, but as far as I understand it, when you have your play and you've got it written and you've got some sort of backing and production team involved, then you can go and pitch this to theatres. Because the idea is that this will debut in the West End in London, which I love, but I understand isn't perfect for everyone. But they pitched it to theatres, and apparently lots of these theatres liked it. I'm sure that they went ka-ching when they heard this idea that maybe this would be something that they could have running for many years at their theatre, to packed houses. But apparently they loved it, and they will have their pick of theatres, which sounds fantastic. And then he said he's hoping that it will be in 2025. Now, my interpretation of that is that if he's hoping it's 2025, he clearly doesn't think it's going to happen in 2024, because we've only got a few more weeks left of 2024. So it's for him, it's that might it be 2026 or might it be 2025? He's hoping it's 2025. So expect this now, second half of 2025. So in about a year's time. I'm very excited about that. Okay, that's just a little random roundup of news from George R. R. Martin. But yeah, what I always try and do roughly halfway through a stream actually is just take a moment to say thank you to people. Patrons, thank you. I always say it, I can't do what I do without your support, and I hugely appreciate it. So thank you so much. That's why I prioritize my patrons' questions. And also, moderators, I got people to show you a bit of mod love a little bit earlier. Again, I hugely appreciate what you do. You make the community here in the live streams a wonderful place to be. So thank you so much. And if you're there and fancy it, send a bit more love there in the chat. So let's go to another question from my patrons. Actually, Maura Lee here. I did say I had some questions from you. This is all about House Tarth. Been talking about your birthday week off in celebration. Happy birthday again to you. You've got a few questions about House Tarth, so I will try my best on these. Was House Tarth originally considered first men? And if so, did they worship the old gods? Yes, and yes, they were one of the first men houses that came across, but they were also the first of the Stormlander houses to marry into the Andals, thereby protecting them from the Andal invasion. The reason why they were the first, I suspect, is just a simple matter of geography. If you're sailing across from Essos to Westeros, you get to Tarth before you get to the Stormlands. Secondly, how did the lords of this house get the name Evenstar? And does this have anything to do with House Dane's Starfall? Yeah, so the lord of the Lord of Tarth has the honorific title Evenstar. Now, is this connected across to House Dane? I mean, my instinct is no. What we do know, because George R. R. Martin has sort of touched on this, is that this is a reference across to the Lord of the Rings. He loves the Lord of the Rings. And in the Lord of the Rings, Arwen, Aragorn's wife, Arwen, she was known as the Even Star. And she was known as the Even Star because she was obviously at the end of the time of the elves in Middle-earth and the most beautiful woman of the age. And George R. R. Martin he plays a lot on this idea of Brienne of Tarth, of her being beautiful. She's described as quite the opposite, but her character is beautiful. And so him associating her with this classically beautiful Arwen is his kind of nod to this idea of what actually is beauty. What is true beauty? Brienne is true beauty. She's even known as Brienne the Beauty in a kind of mocking way. Brienne of Tarth has an ancestral link to House Durrandon. So does this mean she has an ancestral link to House Baratheon as well? Yes, so this is as I said a little bit earlier, most of the major houses within the Stormlands claim an ancestral link back to House Durrandon, which makes them all kind of feel closer together. Does this mean that she has a link in with the Baratheons? Yeah, it does. We're told that she has that House Tarth has a link across to Baratheon. I think even the Targaryens, probably through the Baratheons. So yes, there is a link across there. It's not close. You can't claim to be next in line or anything like that. But yes, there is a family link across. Why did House Tarth and Brienne choose to serve under Renly instead of Stannis? Well, we do get a little bit of a kind of a breakdown of this. So Davos is sent out by Stannis to go around the houses in the Stormlands and just sort of say, would you support us if if Stannis declared himself king? Would you come in behind us? And it quickly became apparent that Renly was actually also doing this and getting a whole lot more success. So Lord Tarth did agree. Many refused to meet Davos. They just said, no, we're supporting Renly. Brienne's father did agree to meet him, but only after dark in a grove of trees somewhere. So nobody could see him do this. And he was very apologetic and said that he couldn't give Stannis his support. So just as a by the by, he doesn't always come across as the best character, Brienne's father, because of the way that he treated her. But there's a degree of, or a hint of some character here, noble character, that whereas many people just refused to see Stannis's envoy, he at least looked him in the eye and said, I'm sorry, I'm not supporting you. So there was a degree of kind of nobility to that. It sounds like, although yes, he did support Renly, he wasn't like throwing he wasn't right there at the front, saying, "Here's my armies, you can have them." But he did agree to Brienne going to Renly to offer her support because she knew Renly. She was in love with Renly, and so she went off, and that was seen as like the support of House Tarth. So what happened afterwards, it's not 100% clear where his support went after that, but yeah, they made the same choice that almost everybody made in the Stormlands, which is to throw their support behind the person who they knew, and the person who had massive backing already, and was a lot more charismatic than Stannis. And finally, you said, do you think Brienne will get knighted in the books like she did on the show, and will it be by Jaime Lannister? So I don't know, because we're still a long way from that, but it's certainly the reason why that felt so good on the TV show, and it did. This was, I mean, we do down season 8 of Game of Thrones for good reason, a lot, but I think if you look back, if you were sort of watching it at the time, episode 2, and it was called The Night of the Seven Kingdoms, when Brienne got knighted, you can remember the scene. That was actually really good. That was easily the best episode, I think, of season 8. And it worked because that's where the story arcs naturally seemed to go. A lot of season 7 things kind of like a bit jarring because it didn't feel like that's naturally where the story arc went. This did. It felt right that Brienne, who all of this time, George R. Martin plays a lot on this idea of a true knight. What makes a knight a true knight? And he plays with this idea that knights, that the actual true knights, the people who are there standing up for the weak in society, the people who are putting themselves second, who are serving, are not actually often real knights. We get with Sir Duncan the Tall, you get the whole controversy: was he actually knighted? Here we get Brienne, who is clearly as knightly a character as you're going to see in all of the Seven Kingdoms, who is technically not a knight because she's a woman. And even characters like Sandor, the Hound, they have some kind of he's protective of Arya and Sansa, as knights should be, but he is not a knight. He refused to be knighted. He's technically not a knight. So George R. Martin really plays. That's not to say that he is a true knight, but he also has some of these characteristics. He plays with this idea about the truest knights are often not actually knights. And given that this is her greatest desire, personal ambition, to be a knight, to have it end like that, and to have Jaime be the person whose own character arc has brought him around to that position, that worked so well. So those storylines are there in the books. So we're a long way away from that in the books. I do sometimes still offhandedly wonder how George R. Martin thinks he can finish this story in just 2 books, but be that as it may, where the storylines are right now, they are going along that same trajectory. So as it stands, yeah, I can definitely see that happening. It would be a really heartwarming moment if it does happen. Reflective Rambling, picking up for Thomas Sponus, saying, one of my favourite POVs is John Connington, currently in the Stormlands. What are your predictions for him, Grayscale and all the best from DK? Right, well, predictions, John Connington. So John Connington, House Connington are a Stormland family. He is there with Vagon having arrived in the Stormlands, he got grayscale. He's hiding it, but he got grayscale. So what's going to happen? Ages and ages ago, I did a live stream with Joe Magician and Aziz from History of Westeros, and we all came to this conclusion, pardon me, that John Connington's grayscale could well, he's going to go to King's Landing, could well start spreading through King's Landing, because there are diseases and outbreaks of lots of different things in the history of the world of Ice and Fire, but not really in the main story. And I think we're all bought into the idea that George R. R. Martin is going to pile on the misery for all of these like moments of light. If Brienne does get knighted, he's going to be piling on the misery. And John Connington having grayscale, and then this starting to spread through the kingdom, through the people of King's Landing, that would be pretty horrific, given what is coming towards them anyway. So, yeah, I think that he will try and hide it for a long time, and then he will pass it on to some people. Then he won't be able to hide it for any longer. At which point, I don't know. Here's the short answer, because it's not clear how central he is going to be. He, as a POV character, he was included to show us what happens with Vagon after Tyrion had left, and to get him from being in Essos over onto Westeros. Now, however, we've got other characters like Arianne, who we can see what's happening when she comes to meet him. So the need for him as a POV character is probably no longer there, which does open up the potential that George R. R. Martin might want to get rid of him. But also, there is this extra information that we might get down in the Citadel. Obviously, in the TV show, then this was Jorah who went over to the Citadel, and Sam fixed him, and that sort of went to show that the Maesters are holding back information. Maybe John Connington will go there. It'll be interesting to see, because Sam is going to be down there, but at some point he's going to head back north. So if we have somebody else, if we need somebody in the Citadel down in Old Town, then perhaps John Connington will be the person. Roman Alakovets saying, in one of the Winds preview chapters, it said that the Golden Company have taken Storm's End. How did they manage that, given that Storm's End is supposed to be impregnable? Not by attacking it, I think, is the short answer. So what you'll find is that Storm's End was held. It's been a while since all of the names are going to evade me here. But Storm's End was originally Renly's, and then Stannis took it, and then Stannis headed north with his army, and he left people there looking after it. One of whom feels a little put out by not being in charge. When John Connington arrives, everybody will know John Connington, and it's entirely possible that it will fall to basically opening the doors, not by siege, but by people allowing them in. Otherwise, people with long memories there at Storm's End, they'll remember what a long siege of Storm's End was like, and it was pretty horrific under Stannis during Robert's Rebellion. They were down to, well, they got past eating rats. They were now starting to think, well, that person's got some juicy arms. Can he get rid of one of them? That was the level that they got to before Davos came in and rescued them with this shipment of onions. So the people with long memories will not want to have a long siege of Storm's End. So it's entirely possible. I think that it was just handed over in a relatively peaceful way. Let's go to Ranebe Mitra saying, my new job has kept me super busy, hence I have a lot of catching up to do. Love to you, Dan, patron members, and the mods. Could you describe the significance of the Isle of Tarth, particularly referring to your theory about islands in Westeros? Okay, so I talked a bit about Tarth just a moment ago. So the relation to my theory. So I don't know if it's a theory. I hesitate to call it a theory. I see this as an observation rather than a particular theory. But it is noticeable to me that if you were to pick on the bits of southern Westeros that will have potentially a significant role to play in fighting the others, you would say, well, what do we need? We need dragonglass. So we need a dragonglass mine. The Weirwood network. Well, where's the heart of the Weirwood network? And then we've got the Sword Dawn, held by House Dane. Where are those three things? They're all on islands. And this ties in with this notion, which makes absolute sense, that the others cannot cross the sea, can't cross water. So if, as I say, it's an observation, we can then sort of say, well, this makes sense that some of these things were decisions, the putting the sword Dawn, which is not just like, oh, it's held by House Dane. Most of the time, there is not somebody with the sword. Most of the time, it stays there on the island waiting for a worthy person, worthy sword of the morning. So the observation is not that every island has some deep connection to confronting the others, but the key things that we might need in order to confront the others are on islands, if that makes sense. So the Quiet Isle, for example, is a really interesting island. Might it play a role in defending against the others? Potentially. But nothing there seems to sort of scream the children of the forest got involved in this. Similarly, Tarth. We've not been to Tarth, so we can't say anything categorically about what may be there. The idea of the even star does seem to imply sort of the end, something, a star you can see just as the night, a beautiful star you can see just as the night is drawing in, and also first thing in the morning. So if I had to sort of talk thematically, it would be to say that's Brienne. And Brienne will have an important role to play as this beautiful star gleaming amidst the darkness. Luna Cascade saying, who were the prominent women of the Stormlands? Were they more patriarchal than other Westerosi houses? Hugs to Dan. Yeah, we know. So there's Elenai, obviously the matriarchal figure from House Durrandon, which injects this kind of godliness, I guess, into them. As for the rest, are they more patriarchal? I guess you could probably say that, certainly compared to somewhere like Dawn, where they don't have the same kind of line of succession has to go to a man first. This does definitely seem to be the case in the Stormlands. But I think the short answer is, you can probably tell I'm struggling to think of any significant named women from the Stormlands other than Brienne, obviously. But no, the main sort of focus is on the fighting, which has historically been the male preserve, and as a result, yeah, they probably are more patriarchal. Magmafrost13 saying, I know you did a Baratheon stream last week. I wanted to throw in a question about Oris and the name Baratheon. Oris took the sigil of House Durrandon. He took their words, their castle, and everything else, but he didn't take their name. If Oris is indeed a bastard, where did the name Baratheon come from? Did he have it before the conquest, and why did he keep it? Well, we're not told, is the honest starting point for this. We're not told. I would tend to agree with you that if he'd wanted to sort of follow the logic completely, then he would have just married in and taken the name, and that he'd already taken the castle, he'd already taken the daughter, he'd already taken the house words, the sigil, as you say, everything. The only thing which he seems to have brought with him is this surname Baratheon. We're not told if he had this surname before, and we're not told what it means. Now, we get a few different kind of possibilities. I know some people have said this might be Theon is obviously Greek for God or godly. So Bar Theon, maybe that's what that is of Theon. That's one possibility of what George R. R. Martin is sort of hinting at here. My personal best instinct is that we don't think of it this way, but actually it does sound a bit like a Valyrian name. You get Targaryen, Velaryon, Baratheon. It's the same kind of feel. Balerion, Baratheon. That's the kind of feel we've got. So perhaps this is one of those. Yes, he might well be the bastard brother of Aegon, but maybe he took for himself a surname which was an ancient Valyrian surname. Maybe he decided he quite liked that name, and so he took that for himself. In the same way that you get Daemon Blackfire took the name Blackfire, surname Blackfire for himself. That is probably my best guess, rather than this was an ancient family, the Baratheons, and he was the last in the line. I think it fits better that he just chose a name. Perhaps there was something in his family history before that linking across to it, but I think it's a Valyrian name. I'm not sure how much thought George R. R. Martin put into it, but that seems to be there. Incidentally, there are other names as well as the kind of the Valyrian ones I've just mentioned. There is a House Bar Emmon close by as well, who have very strong links across to the Targaryens, who, although technically they were in the Stormlands, they paid fealty to, sort of geographically in the Stormlands, paid fealty to Dragonstone, and were very loyal to them. So it feels likely to me that this is a name chosen to reflect a Valyrian link. Emma S. Asking, is there a reason that the Stormlands hate Dawn, or is it based off of Centuries of War? Yeah, it's Centuries of War, I think, is the short but honest answer to that. The culture has been built up around this. We always have to be defending ourselves against the threat of attack from Dawn. And the moment that you've got that culture, which is then established in architecture, that the way that they live is dominated by the fact that they're behind castle walls because they're always concerned about an attack from Dawn. The moment you establish that then becomes ingrained in the population psyche. So yes, years of war, which then became sort of ingrained by the way that they had to live. Raymond Lukovic saying, a follow-up. John Connington said that he plans to take Storm's End by guile, which makes a straightforward surrender unlikely, in my opinion. Or betrayal. is the other option. I think a straightforward surrender is probably not exactly how it happened, but yeah, a betrayal from within the castle is more what I was thinking. Um, sort of by guile. I don't think that he said, "Oh, well, I knew this clever route in. If we just sail some boats in, and then we go into this little cavern, and then we climb up." I don't think it's like that. I don't think that John Connington is going to be the person who, after millennia, is the person to lead the first successful attack on Storm's End. Um, doesn't seem to be his style, but I think that him making contact with people in there is his style. Commander, actually, no, hang on. We've got a question from Gina Z saying, "Hi, Robert. I hope you're having a good week. Could you talk about the history of Summerhall? I'm curious to know why it was located in the Stormlands." Yeah, absolutely. So, Summerhall, we all know about the tragedy of Summerhall. Um, Summerhall is let's get the map up quickly again. Here. So I'm not sure if it's marked on the map. 1 second. Oh, yes, there it is. So it's sort of in the middle of the map there. It is, we're told, in the foothills, in the Dornish marches, in the foothills of the mountains. So it is in the Stormlands, but there is the Prince's Pass is the main route into Dorne. The other overland route is what's called the Boneway, which is a lot harder route. It's going over the mountains, but it goes past Summerhall, or starts really at Summerhall, and then heads up and ends at House Ironwood, which is one of the biggest and most impressive houses in Dorne. So that's where it is now. As for why it's there, this is Diran II, the king who is known as Diran the Good. He basically brought Dorne into the Seven Kingdoms, married the Dornish woman, and in order to kind of cement this in a way, and also because he wanted to improve communications with Dorne, he built a summer palace near to Dorne for the Targaryens now. So that's why it's there. And the idea was this isn't like a big castle. This was to show we're no longer scared of you. This is the Dornish marches. Normally we would build big castles here, but now we're just building this summer palace. Somewhere that the Targaryens can come, and the Dornish can pop up north for a little while, and they can come here as well. And it's great. It's a symbol of friendship between Dorne and the rest of the Seven Kingdoms. So that's why it was built there. Now, Diran II did like to use it, but then Maekar is the next person that we know had he was basically given it, and his son, so Egg, grew up there. So Maekar, and that was basically his home. He didn't grow up really in King's Landing. He spent a lot of time in King's Landing, but his home was in Summerhall when he was young, and that's where his dragon egg was, in Summerhall. So Maekar, we're told, when he was passed over for being Hand of the King, he went there to brood. That was his home base, and so it was sort of the king would be based in King's Landing. The heir would be based in Dragonstone. The next one would get Summerhall. That was the kind of feel you have. Whether that carried on afterwards, we have to wait for Fire and Blood Part 2, I suspect, for the details of that kind of thing. But that was what was there. the the logic, if you follow this down, is that this was given not to the heir, but maybe to like another Targaryen. The logic is maybe this was where Jaehaerys was based, Jaehaerys the second, that is, or maybe even a young heiress. Who knows? It's entirely possible. Luna Cascade, where do the Baratheons fit into the pecking order of Westerosi houses during the time of the dance? Aemon and a Baratheon lady make a decent match. Yes, absolutely. So they were, um, in terms of the pecking order, the Targaryens are top through all this period for the first 150 odd years. The Targaryens are top. Then you get House Velaryon, House Hightower, and House Baratheon, who are next. And so Aemon went to the Baratheons, Aemon being the brother of the king, to marry one of the daughters of Lord Baratheon, and that was a good match. The Baratheons they'd been married 2-3 times to the Targaryens by this point. This was one of the families that they were happy to be marrying into, which incidentally does add to this idea that probably Orys was related to the Targaryens, because we know that they liked to marry their own. So yeah, they were in at the start of the dance. There's a reason. Yes, Storm's End is close, but there's a reason why both sides sent high-powered envoys straight away to the Baratheons, because the two other families, the Velaryons, had already declared. Basically, the Hightowers had obviously already declared. The next biggest house and most important house was not the Lannisters. It wasn't the Starks. This was the Baratheons. That's who they wanted to get on board. Commander Ray. I wanted to ask a broader question about the Stormlands and how they differentiate from the Reach, and what led to some houses being Stormlanders instead of the Reach. Well, this is one of those things of where was the line drawn on the map? And in particular, as I say, the Stormlanders have got a very clear identity of being Stormlanders, tied into the fact that they can tie their heritage back in with House Durrandon. So that's why you get some houses like House Caron and Nightfall. Their castle is all the way over at the top of the Prince's Pass, quite a long way out from the main part of the Stormlands, and very close to the Reach, pretty much bordering on the Reach. So why? But historically, that's who they were. Which is a boring answer, but that is the answer. And as much as over time the Storm King, the lands that Storm King controlled, sort of expanded and contracted and moved in slightly different ways, where they ended up was pretty much what people knew to be this. These are the Stormlanders here. You can't go south because that's where the Mountains of Dawn are. If you're going north, then you're in the what were for a long time disputed lands, but then became the Crown lands, with King's Landing. West is the Reach. Lady Pushkins, have you heard of the Green Children of Woolpit? I read something and it made me think of Mira and Jojen. Perhaps George R. R. Martin was inspired by this. So this is perhaps a digression, but it's a really fascinating story from history. I had heard of them. I did have to refresh my mind just a touch for this, but this is a story from 12th century England in Suffolk, somewhere near, I think, near Bury St Edmunds, for those who know that part of the world. And it's a story, but it certainly seems to be one of those stories which there's some truth to it. It was recorded by more than one contemporary account, and although the details have changed, the heart of the story is the same. And it's of these two children who mysteriously appear in this village called Woolpit. At the time, it might have been called Wolfpit. These kind of names shifted a little bit over time. But they arrive in this place called Woolpit, and their skin has a mysterious green tinge to it, and they speak a language that it's not the local language, and they apparently only eat green beans, and it's like, where are these children from? What's going on? And as the children grew up, slowly they started to learn a little bit of English or Old English or whatever it was that they spoke in that part of the land. Um, and they said that when they were asked where they came from, they said, a land where the sun never shone and the light was like twilight. And according to one version of the story, she said that everything there was green. And according to another version, she said it was called St. Martin's Land. Now, these two children, the boy sadly died. The girl grew up. She had a more varied diet. She lost the green tinge to her skin. Married someone local, but we're told that she had wanton ways or something along those lines, which makes it sound perhaps more fun than some of the other locals. But the stories are then, well, where are they from? Are they from the land of fairy? I mean, nowadays are they UFOs? Were they dropped in from somewhere? It's the kind of thing I've not heard that George R. R. Martin took particular inspiration from this. It's the type of story that, because it's a bit odd, but also it's not crazy. It does have that kind of ring of truth to it. There are certainly some kind of, you can come up with some rational explanations for what it is. Maybe their diet was a bit odd and connected with some kind of genetic inheritance, gave their skin this kind of green tint to it. Apparently, there were some Flemish people based not too far away, so maybe that was the language they were speaking. There are lots of explanations that you could come up with, but yes, it's a mystery. And yeah, if anyone knows any more about that, do drop it in the chat and I'll see what I can pick up on it. Jay asking about the history of the Stormlands and the Dornish marches. Why was it? Was it the intra First Men violence, First Men versus the Rhoynish, etc.? And have the Reach and Stormlanders had conflicts over this area, or are just either of them against the Dornish? Well, we're told that yes, there were fights between the Stormlanders, wars between the Stormlanders and the Reach. We're not really told details of them, but we're told that they happened. As for were these First Men versus First Men? I mean, these battles went on for a long time, and so yes, they were. So the Rhoynish only arrived much later. The Andals weren't there when these fights were first happening, and then everybody became Andals anyway. So, yeah, this was just humans against humans. It does seem as if, pardon me, it seems as if after the humans had finished fighting the giants, the children of the forest, they then started trying to carve out the lands for themselves. And that then led to fighting amongst each other. And as you get this strong leadership appearing in different places in Storm's End, then this sense of shared cultural identity there for the Stormlanders emerges. Let's have a quick flick through the chat. Some talk about the star and the Northern Star, which is guiding Jon towards the north. And yeah, it looks like there's a good chat going on there. We're not going to dive into all of that, but let's go to another question from my patrons. And Phelan Walker saying, I'm working my way slowly through the books and just started the chapter where Arya meets, or rather overhears, the ghost of High Heart. I'm curious on how Beric Dondarrion's initial mission led them to where they are now. I was also a little shocked that they, especially Harwin, would take Arya hostage, considering her father, in a manner of speaking, formed their group, at least initially. Okay, so how did they end up where they were? Was they were formed initially. This was Beric Dondarrion was sent out with a small group of men to hunt down the mountain. And while they were doing that, war erupted. Ned was killed. And this group of men started to, led by Beric, it has to be said, take on actually quite a, this second incarnation of the group, quite a kind of valiant approach of actually caring for the people in the Riverlands. Now, the Brotherhood without banners, because they're claiming they're not fighting for any particular side in the war, but they're trying to look out for the small folk. So what that means is that they are spread out across lots of different parts of the Riverlands. They've got friends and allies in lots of different places, and because they don't technically have an allegiance to any of the different sides. And let's not forget that during this war, the sides shifted quite regularly. Who are these people fighting for? Who are those people fighting for? They suddenly found themselves in possession of a really important political prisoner. And the Brotherhood, who picked her up, basically thought, this is above our pay grade. I don't know what to do with this. Do we let her go? Surely, the Starks would love it if we gave her back, but the Lannisters would also love it if we gave her to them. We'll go ask Beric. So that's the feel you've got here, is that they just go, this is clearly important. Not normally what we're about here. We're like fighting off people who are oppressing the small folk, and we're sort of trying to get food from these different places and distribute it and things like that. So that's the kind of feel that they've got going on there. She wants to escape, and they don't want to let her escape, and so that's where the kind of the feel is she being hostage? Yes, she is being kept hostage by them, but they're not doing it in a way of like, because we're here with this particular, they simply don't know what to do. They want somebody to make a decision for them. So yeah, and Beric, by this point, Beric has died and come back a few times, and so they're actually, when they're thinking about Beric, they're not just thinking about, well, who's our boss. They're thinking, this is someone who clearly he's been touched by the gods in some good way. He's got a mission, and so if anyone knows what to do, he will know what to do. Let's go to question from Sir Friend, saying, happy Thursday, Robert, and to you too. An excuse for me to talk about the character behind my username. Davos has always seemed to me like a character that would make perfect narrative sense to survive past the end of the book. Do you agree? Does he get to eventually return to his wife and younger children on Cape Wrath? Possibly does he end up as master of ships? Keep up the good work, great content. Best wishes, warmest regards. Well, best wishes and warmest regards back to you. Will Davos survive? I hope so. I think we often, when we're trying to think about the end, we get caught up in this bittersweet idea, as if there's not going to be any big bits of moments of happiness. There will be some bright moments of happy endings, people who do actually get what they deserve, some people who don't get what they deserve, and a lot of people, some kind of mixture in between. But there will be some characters who are good characters who we're cheering on, and they do get a good ending for them. Now, I might Davos survive and be one of those people? He's certainly a good character who we want to be cheering on. Might he survive? Quite possibly. I think the biggest concern that I have for him is at the moment is the fact that he's gone to find Rickon, and I think most people fully signed up to the idea that Rickon's not going to survive for all that long. Well, what does that mean for Davos? Is if Rickon gets captured by someone, is Davos also going to get captured? Because he'll be with Rickon. So it's entirely possible, and I hate to put too much of a dampener on this, it's entirely possible, or not outside the realms of possibility, that Davos could die when Rickon dies. It, if George R. R. Martin keeps him for a POV, you have to say, well, why do we need this POV? Once he's got Rickon back, somebody in Stannis' camp, well, we've got Asher and Theon in Stannis' camp. We've now got 2 POVs going on there, so we don't really need him there. What about in Winterfell? Well, sooner or later, the Starks are going to be coming back to Winterfell. We don't really need him there. We've got Melisandre at the wall. Is his POV needed? And again, you've got to say, well, probably no. But I think we can just go with it. I hope so, and I hope he survives. And I hope he gets back home at the end. I think the thing to say though is that this would not be just a happy and they lived happily ever after kind of moment, because he's gone out serving his lord, his king now, and he's seen his children die because of it. Him returning home is not just a happy, like Sam returning at the end of Lord of the Rings, here's Rosie and I'll get my nice happy family and we'll live forever, it's going to be great. That's not what this will be. This will be Davos having tried his best all the way through to serve his king and do the right thing. And he has saved some lives along the way, but his own family are damaged. So I'd like to think so, but I don't think it's necessary for the story. Let's go to a question from Diego Godoy saying, Hola, Robert. Hola. Apologies for the unrelated question. Oh, okay. So, yes, that's the end of my questions about the Stormlands. But if you've got more questions about the Stormlands, I will try and pick some up in the chat. Now is a good time. I've got a couple of Lord of the Rings questions after this one as well. So now is a good time to drop questions in the chat. I will get to as many of them as I can. Diego Godoy saying, I was recently rereading A Storm of Swords, the chapters leading up to the Red Wedding. In one of them, once they get to the twins, Catelyn goes to talk to the Maester to inquire about Edmure's soon-to-be wife. My question is, did the twins' Maester know about the betrayal and massacre that the Freys were planning? If so, should he not have tried to stop it? Well, we don't know. This is Maester Brennan, I believe his name is. We don't know, but he probably knew, because the communications, there were communications going on between him and Tywin, and who was in charge of communications. the maesters, so he will have got the messages. And what normally happens is that the maesters would read the message and then relay it on to the Lord. Now, probably that's what happens in the twins. Don't imagine the 90-something-year-old Walder Frey is reading his own teeny tiny messages that have been attached to raven legs. I imagine that that's what the maester is there to do. So the maester probably knew. Should he? And incidentally, he does a really good job of not giving the game away to Cat. She goes up there basically to say, "I don't know anything about this woman that Edmure's marrying. Is she? Is she likely to be able to have children? What's going on here?" And basically, the maester goes, "Oh, yes, yes, yes. Don't you worry about that. She's a fine childbearing age. You know, her family's got this great history of lots of children." And he's almost quite jovial. And she seems reassured, and then goes away. So if he knows, he's actually doing quite a good job of hiding it. He doesn't hint to her, and by the way, run. He doesn't do any of that. So he probably knows, but we can't be 100% certain. Should he have said something? And I think the answer has to be no. Because morally, should he, knowing that this was like going against all the laws of gods and men, that's not really how the maesters see their role. The maesters see their role as being they are just passing on the information. The reason why all of the lords of the land have maesters is because they think they can trust them. They think they can trust them to write and read the deepest, darkest plotting secrets going on, and not be alerting their enemies to what's happening. Discretion is absolutely a central part of what the maesters are. And if it came out that a maester gave the game away, then a whole load of lords would then be looking at their maester and saying, "Hang on, so you've been reading my secret messages over there. Have you been telling people?" So the maesters as a whole, they're for the good of the whole order, they cannot allow that to be seen as a thing that happens. So should he have, from the maester's perspective, absolutely 100% no. Should he have, from a moral perspective, I think that's for us to make our own minds up. Should he have, from the House Frey perspective? Of course not. Right, let's have a quick flick through the chat. The maesters, pantomime horse, saying these maesters, grey rats, all of them, absolutely. And then that elf Torrent saying, "I need to stop watching when Robert yawns. I always catch it." Well, sorry about that. It's just gone midnight here, so apologies if that is if my yawns are coming across. Sean's saying, "I said earlier, I met George R. R. Martin recently in Scotland and told him my fan theory, Lyanna is still alive, and he didn't deny it." Well, there you go. You heard it here first, guys. He would not say either way, I think is the answer. He's long got into the habit of not answering questions now about pretty much anything. Then Effective Rambling saying, "Oh, didn't realise. Congratulations on the 800k." Yes, thank you. I should probably said that earlier. Yeah, just a few days ago, I think I hit, or this channel, not this channel, the main channel, Indie Geek hit 800,000 subscribers, which is fantastic. So I probably should do a few thanks. Thank you if you've been here for a while, if you've been supporting. Many of you have for such a long time. Patrons, moderators, people, if you just watch videos, thank you. I hugely appreciate it. It humbles me. And yeah, only 200,000 to go to 1 million. I don't know what I'll do there. I'll have a party or something. I'll be very excited. But yes, it's a big milestone, and I'm very happy about that. Let's go to Sean there, just saying about George R. Martin. 100% he was humouring me. Yeah. Let's go to a couple of questions about Lord of the Rings. This is I'll pick up on more questions in the chat. Lord of the Rings ran a bit. Mitra saying, could you describe the discourse in the fandom regarding Gil-galad's parentage? Are you redoing your original Gil-galad video on the main channel? I couldn't find it anymore. Yes, that's one of the ones that I'm going to be redoing. Incidentally, talking about redoing videos, I think tomorrow is my redone why must there always be a Stark in Winterfell? So if you've always wondered why there must always be a Stark in Winterfell, is it just a cool political phrase? Is there something else going on? This is the start. This is the first of a number of videos looking at the Starks, Winterfell, their links across the crypts, their links across to the others. There's a lot going on in that. And this is the starting point. Why must there always be a Stark in Winterfell? So do keep an eye out for that. As for Gil-galad, this is one of those things that Tolkien changed his mind on. If you're new to sort of digging deep into Tolkien lore, we often approach it as if, for understandable reasons, Tolkien had this whole interconnected world completely finished and done, and with no plot holes anywhere, and that's entirely understandable because that is largely as we see it presented to us. But behind the scenes, there are huge amounts of things that he changed his mind on a lot. Some of them, like the nature of orcs or the nature and the number of Balrogs, that he changed his mind on. What Galadriel was up to in the Second and Third Age. There's a lot of things that he changed his mind on quite a lot, and Gil-galad is one of them. I won't dig into all of the different family trees for the elves, but basically, he was the heir apparent in for the Noldorin elves by the end of the First Age to be the High King of the Noldorin elves. This shifted a few times exactly whose son he was, and therefore how the line of succession came down to him. In the First Stage, lots of elves died in a very short period of time. Lots of them had very similar sounding names, so it gets very complicated very quickly. But I mean, and this is my general take on these kind of things, where Tolkien changes, but he didn't really change his mind on the idea that the end point, he wanted Gil-galad to be indisputably the rightful king of the Noldor by the beginning of the Second Age. And the question is just, where did that line of succession come down to him? So as far as I'm concerned, yes, you can get into lots of fun discourse going to, oh, well, originally he thought this and then he decided that. Oh, and that story, actually, it seems to imply. The fact of the matter is that he decided that Gil-galad was the king, and it was just a matter of where does he fit him into the family tree. And Martin S. connected with this, asking when I read Lord of the Rings for the first time, saying that he read it for the first time in '94. He read The Hobbit first in the spring and The Silmarillion last in the autumn of that year. It was 14 good old days. I wish I could discover Tolkien for the first time again. Yeah, I've said this a few times, so apologies if you've heard this on this channel before. I genuinely don't know when I first read Lord of the Rings. And maybe you've got a book like this that you love. This has always been a part of my life. I can't remember my life without the Lord of the Rings in it. It's just one of those things that, similarly, Doctor Who has always been a part of my life. I can't separate it. I can remember and if you've never listened to them, they're fantastic. The BBC Radio adaptations being played family holidays in the car as we were driving off wherever it was. That's my first actual memory of the story, but even then I knew what the story was as it was being played. I can remember when I was a teenager reading it and somebody asking me, oh, am I enjoying it? And me saying, oh yeah, I've read it a few times before now. I genuinely can't remember the first time I did it. It's always just been there sort of by a sort of cultural osmosis. It has become a part of me. So I wish I could give a better answer on this one. I really do. The Silmarillion I did leave a little bit later. I have to say I was probably late teenager before I took to the Silmarillion. But yeah, the main Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit, I just generally don't have an answer. Which is it's quite fun. If you in the chat, a couple of people saying if you've got like a book like that or something, then I'd love to hear it. And so Raccoon saying, for me, it's the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy that's always been a part of my life. Yeah, but it's not quite to the same extent, but I know exactly what you mean. I share that. That's always been. Again, there was a great, I think it was a BBC radio adaptation of that, which often was in the car when we're going on holidays. And let's go to a couple of questions. Curse Ballerina saying, John Conn says some of the Stormland houses will ally with him now that Robert and Renly are dead. Which ones? Why does the heir to House Whitehood join him? Do they not all serve Stannis because they blame him for Renly's death? Well, I mean, we don't know. We're not told. But it's fair to say that there is a political vacuum in the Stormlands now. Robert's gone, Renly's gone, Stannis, as far as everyone's concerned, has abandoned them and gone north. So who are people going to follow? John Connington is well known. He was long thought dead, but he was local boy done good. He rose to be Hand of the King, so he's very well known, and so not just his own house, Connington, but there will be some smaller houses which sort of like a vassal to that house, and then there'll be another few around. Yes, after Renly, then many of the houses went over and started supporting Stannis, but not all of them. Some went with Loras and the Tyrells, and so there was no real love for Stannis. And so if John Connington can come in and say, okay, I'm here now, Stannis is gone, maybe he'll never even come back. Here's this fantastic king for you, Aegon. Yeah, I could well imagine some people will roll in behind him. And Auntie Slayer saying, congrats on the milestone. Thank you very much. There's no creator more deserving, truly a man of the people. Your videos and streams are my respite from in real life stresses. Cheers. Well, thank you. I hugely appreciate that. Thank you very much. People saying when they first came across The Lord of the Rings or read it, 1968, says Stephanie Frederick. Derry's read it before for me at 23 read-throughs and counting. Robin Hobb's Realm of the Elderlings. Love Robin Hobb. That's a goodly amount of read-throughs as well. And Project Zeus saying, can't say how much I love these videos. Been backpacking Latin America since February and love watching these streams. Thanks, because relaxing would be working sometimes. Absolutely. Cam's Crash Course, The Hobbit was my first book report at 6. Yeah, oh, fantastic. Yeah, lots of people get to The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings really early. Okay, I think that's the last questions I've got from my patrons. But just coming up, so as I say, I think tomorrow, check out the main channel for the video on Why Must There Always Be a Stark in Winterfell. I've got a whole series of that coming up. I've got 3 or 4 videos already planned in my head for that, so look forward to that. And what else to say? I think that's probably it. I will be back next week with another one of these. I think from here we'll go up to the Crown Lands. Maybe we'll look at King's Landing. Maybe we'll look at the Crown Lands as a whole. Yeah, let's do that. Let's look at the Crown Lands as a whole, and then we'll try and pick off a couple of the main families. The Targaryens is such a big topic, probably deserves more than just one live stream. Okay, if you are watching this back a little bit later, there will be appearing somewhere around here a link to other live streams. If you enjoy this one, you'd like to watch a bit more, appearing somewhere around here-ish is going to be a link to my Patreon page, which is the best way to support this channel if you wish to do so. And thank you very much if you do. Quick hello to you if you're you made it all the way through this video and you're watching back a little bit later. I know not everyone watches these live, or if you're watching them over on Twitter X, which we're simul streaming over there. Hello to you. I know I don't sort of engage with what's going on there, but lovely to see you as well. Martin S saying, I went to the UK for the first time in the summer of '94, the same summer as my first Lord of the Rings read through. Remember looking for Tolkien books and encyclopedias in bookstores in Cambridge. Happy memories of bookstores in Cambridge. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so that's all for this time. Take care, everyone, and I will see you again next week.